Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express, and as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. Tonight, the balance of power from Washington to Moscow is shifting once again. Fresh from brokering a fragile ceasefire in Gaza, President Donald Trump is turning his attention to Ukraine and preparing to meet Vladimir Putin in Budapest. But as Trump gains momentum abroad, questions are mounting at home and in Russia. Is Putin facing battlefield failures and mounting domestic strain, beginning to lose control? Without further ado, let's take a look at our latest reports to find out more.
As Moscow pushes for a breakthrough in the Donbass, Russian opposition voices warn. If this offensive fails, Vladimir Putin may seek a ceasefire by year's end. But peace, as defined by the Kremlin, is not peace as the West understands it. Putin's ideal war is a controlled conflict, a special operation that justifies repression, avoids economic collapse, and can be paused or reignited at will. The goal? A deal that weakens Ukraine and allows Russia to resume aggression on its own terms. Despite staggering losses and growing unrest, the Kremlin clings to this model, yet cracks are forming. US President Donald Trump, frustrated by Putin's intransigence, now considers arming Ukraine with long-range missiles to force negotiations. Trump is set to meet with Putin in Budapest to try to resolve the war in Ukraine, but a date has yet to be determined. With global pressure mounting and domestic support waning, Putin's old playbook may no longer work. What happens next could redefine his regime and the future of the war.
And now let's zone in on the explaining portion of our show. Peace talks for the Russia-Ukraine war have hopped from Turkey's bustling streets to Saudi Arabia's desert halls and even Alaska's frozen edges. But a real breakthrough still feels like a distant dream.
Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, peace talks have been a rocky road. Early negotiations in Belarus collapsed fast, and Turkey's March 2022 Istanbul talks saw Ukraine float neutrality for security guarantees, but Russia walked away. A grain deal to ease global food shortages was the lone success. In August 2023, Saudi Arabia's Jeddah summit rallied 40 nations behind Ukraine's peace plan, though Moscow called it a non-starter. In 2025, US-Ukraine talks in Jeddah pushed a 30-day ceasefire, with Washington promising military aid if Russia played ball. Putin didn't. US-Russia talks in Anchorage hinted at territorial concessions, infuriating Kyiv. Turkey tried again in May, but clashing agendas and Zelensky's distrust derailed progress. From Copenhagen to Davos, talks keep hitting the same wall. Ukraine demands full withdrawal. Russia wants its annexed lands recognized.
And now, as tradition demands, we're taking a look at the issue in greater detail. So, let's begin. A question with stakes, from Donetsk to the Danube. Is Vladimir Putin losing control, just as Donald Trump rides Gaza's ceasefire momentum into Europe and toward a face-to-face in Budapest? On the battlefield, Russia is again hunting a decisive breakthrough in the Donbass. Opposition analysts say that if this push stalls just like May's summer gamble, the Kremlin may float a ceasefire before the year is over. Yet Putin's preferred endgame isn't Western-brokered peace. It's an ideal war, limited, deniable, restartable, and capped by a deal that freezes lines on Russia's terms and lets the shooting resume later. Think Minsk rebranded, Steinmeier repackaged. But reality bites. Russian losses are enormous for modest gains. Drone strikes are dragging the war into Russian daily life, and polls show most Russians now favor talks. Mobilization remains a toxic issue. The regime can repress, but it fears sudden shocks that force society to feel the war all at once. Enter Donald Trump, dangling the tomahawks. He says he will meet Putin in Budapest after a productive call, while hosting Zelensky in Washington. The signal: pressure Moscow, maybe with long-range missiles, in pursuit of a deal. The noise: mixed messages about depleting US stocks, past deadlines missed, and a Kremlin warning: that tomahawks would qualitatively escalate the conflict. So is Putin losing control? He's losing options, that's for sure. His old playbook, slow grind, managed public, coerced peace, is colliding with exhausted manpower, economic strain, and an American president newly willing to test Russian red lines. If Donbass doesn't break Ukraine, the pressure to pause simply continues to grow. If Trump couples rhetoric with real capability for Kyiv, Moscow's room to maneuver shrinks even further. So, will Budapest end the war? Will it expose who's actually bluffing? If Trump turns momentum into material pressure, Putin faces a choice that he hates: climb down or continue to climb a ladder that no longer can reach victory. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Bohdan Nahaylo, editor-in-chief at the Kyiv Post. Hello and welcome once again to TVP World.
My pleasure, as always.
So, my favorite and deeply sarcastic comment on X following yesterday's announcement of the meeting between Trump and Putin was that, all right, they're going to meet in Budapest, maybe sign some kind of memorandum. Everything is going to be fine. Of course, you do appreciate the irony. Do you think matters are now heading in that particular direction?
No, I don't think so. I think this is a stalling tactic, primarily by Putin, but with Trump playing along. Look, today there's supposed to be a meeting in the White House, Trump and Zelensky, with Ukrainian hopes focused on Trump giving the go-ahead for Tomahawk deliveries, long-range missiles, or rather cruise missiles. So everything was set for that. And then suddenly, if you want, Trump removes the seat, takes the chair away from Zelensky, as Zelensky is about to sit down and talk to him by making this announcement. You notice that the Ukrainian delegation already in Washington said that they were taken by surprise, and you could read the element of shock in their statement.
Indeed, one commentator in particular said that instead of long-range missiles, Ukraine got a long-range curveball from Washington, D.C. Now, how do you think they're going to deal with that? Given that, of course, on the one hand, we have Trump, whose priority is to end the war, even if it's at the expense of certain things that Ukrainians hold dear. On the other hand, of course, we have the Ukrainian and the European perspective, which is more about weakening Russia as a regional power and preventing further aggression, of course, saving lives. Do you think that these can be reconciled in any way that wouldn't be very harmful to Ukraine, given that we've already had Trump first being very friendly towards Putin, later on expressing his dissatisfaction, now coming back to this sort of position that he used to have once again? What do you think is going to happen? Is it simply going to be a reset and we're going to be waiting once again for some sort of resolution?
It's going to be a stalling delay, just as things seem to be moving finally. And there was much being said about Trump's change of mind, that he was so frustrated and annoyed with the lack of movement from Putin that he was actually going to deliver this time and not just talk and stall. Look, it's very difficult for Ukraine because Zelensky today will have to put on a brave face and pretend that, okay, President Trump, we acknowledge that you're doing your best to reach a just settlement, or at least a suspension of the war. But insult is added to injury by the fact that Orban is involved. Orban, who has been the main staller within the European Union of helping Ukraine, both in terms of its struggle against Russian aggression, but also integration into the EU or NATO. So it's a difficult challenge diplomatically for Zelensky and for Ukraine to, as I say, put on a brave face, disguise their anger, and hope for the best, though it does seem that once again it's going to be a question of delaying for weeks, if not months. And of course, this plays into Putin's hands. Putin wants to damage the Ukrainian energy infrastructure as much as possible as winter sets in, and to advance in the Donbass. Because he's under great pressure domestically because of the failure to make headway both on the front and from the damage that Ukraine has inflicted on Russian energy infrastructure through its strikes with its long-range drones and missiles.
So let's break down the situation. First, briefly, do you think that the choice of another country, perhaps Turkey, for example, would have been less aggravating from Ukraine's standpoint?
No, Turkey would have been very good because, as you know, Erdogan plays it both ways. But for the record, Turkey supports Ukraine's not only independence, but its territorial integrity. They stress that, which means Crimea and Donbass still belonging to Ukraine. Whereas Budapest, Orban is not only hostile to Ukraine, but is also promoting the idea that Ukraine has no chance whatsoever and should just capitulate, in other words, to Russia's demands.
So my first question really did include the sort of prediction that it could be something that's not something welcome for Ukraine. Reference to the Budapest memorandum. Obviously, the ghost of that memorandum hangs above these talks, or will hang above these talks. Could it be even worse than that, you think?
It could be worse because this could be a total sellout if Putin and POTUS, as they call him in Washington, the American president, do reach an agreement behind the back of Ukraine, facilitated by Orban, cynically. This could be very bad. It's also not only bad for Ukraine, it's a very big slap in the face of Europe, of the EU and Ukraine's partners in Europe, but also in Canada and Australia, Japan, South Korea, elsewhere. So it's, again, this very unpleasant moment where Trump ignores international law, beats his chest as the Tarzan that I see him, the almighty god of international relations, and with total disregard for sensitivities, for commitments already made to America's allies, moves ahead with these unforeseen, arbitrary gestures, which he says are aimed at bringing peace, but it's really about him achieving what he wants, self-promotion, looking good, and not really giving a damn for anybody else.
But how can the Ukrainian delegation make the best of the situation that they're in today? Do you think that because President Zelensky is meeting Trump in person, that the chemistry that he has managed to develop over time could actually allow him perhaps to make some slight suggestions to Trump with regards to the situation? And also, do you think that the best tactic for the time being could be another wait and see on the part of Ukraine? Because Putin does have a habit of essentially undermining his own brief successes. I mean, some people said he was very well positioned to make huge gains following the meeting in Alaska, but what he did was essentially bombarding Ukraine, all these barrages, actually intensifying after that, which has alienated Trump and anyone else who thought that this might be a path to peace. Do you think that Putin will simply do the same thing again?
He's likely to do the same. He's continuing his attacks on Ukraine every night, every day. I'm in Kyiv right now. Kyiv has been spared for the last few days, but there are continuing strikes on various Ukrainian cities, both in the east and in the south, and Odessa in particular, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, etc. So they're not letting up, and it's hard to see what he's playing at, Putin. I mean, instead of reaching out for some kind of compromise by which he would then secure possession for the time being of the territories that he's occupied, and presumably demanding that Ukraine not move further westward in some way.
Is he scared of the tomahawks, really? Because all of a sudden he started to be very willing to negotiate.
He's scared of the tomahawks, but look, let's not overemphasize the importance of the tomahawks. The tomahawks, of course, would be very useful, but I think that the Americans would put certain conditions on their use. Already they're saying they could be used for defensive only purposes, not offensive, meaning striking deep into Russia, if we read the words correctly in between the lines. But I think what's most important is that the Ukrainians are developing a capacity with their own drones and potentially missiles to strike deep within Russia, as they have been doing, to hit energy structures very hard, damaging the Russian economy, damaging morale and the psychological setup in Russia. I mean, we are seeing for the very first time not only discontent from the mounting queues of motorists in Russia waiting for petrol, but also young people in St. Petersburg singing anti-war songs, etc. I mean, the mood has been changing. It's not the mood of 2 years ago. It's even, let's say, leading propagandists on TV are saying this is not a war that can be won quickly, and we overestimated the potential for doing that, and we're in for a long haul, and etc. Europe's fully behind, well, more or less fully behind. Look, we saw today even news that the Brits have handed over a large party of missiles and anti-aircraft defense weapons. So Europe is continuing, and the German chancellor is making very good statements. So once again, Putin must feel the pressure, but at the same time, Trump is letting the side down badly by trying to do it his own way, which plays into the hands of Putin, and he again stalls at the expense of Ukraine, its cities, its population, and its potential.
Bohdan Nahaylo was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you absolutely don't want to miss. 2 Russian oil facilities were hit overnight in a coordinated Ukrainian drone strike. The strikes targeted refineries deep inside Russian territory, far away from the front lines.
Ukraine says its drones struck 2 major oil refineries, one in Saratov and another in Kstovo in the Nizhny Novgorod region, disrupting fuel supplies used by the Russian military. The Saratov refinery, one of Russia's oldest, processed nearly 5 million tons of oil last year and plays a key role in fueling the war effort. Russia's defense ministry claimed its air defenses shot down 12 drones, though damage was confirmed. This isn't the first time that Saratov site has been hit. A previous strike in September sparked a fire. Meanwhile, in Kstovo, the Lukoil refinery was also damaged. Open-source analysts identified the hit structure as a key hydrotreatment unit, capable of processing hundreds of thousands of tons of fuel annually. Ukrainian sources say these attacks are part of a broader campaign to cripple Russia's fuel infrastructure and weaken its ability to wage war.
Russia may be losing more troops than it can replace as its offensive near Pokrovsk intensifies. Leaked documents and battlefield reports suggest staggering monthly losses.
Russian forces are suffering up to 50,000 casualties a month as they push toward Pokrovsk, one of Ukraine's last major strongholds in Donetsk. A leaked Russian report covering January to September shows 281,000 total casualties, including nearly 87,000 killed and over 33,000 missing. That's about 35,000 losses a month, but recent fighting suggests the rate is climbing fast. Ukrainian analysts say Russian losses have jumped 18 to 20% in the Pokrovsk region alone. That could mean 1,200 casualties a day, with around 400 killed and many of them missing or presumed dead. Russia's recruitment rate, around 32,000 troops a month, can't keep up. If these casualty trends continue, the Kremlin could be facing a monthly manpower deficit of 20,000 soldiers. And with no sign of a slowdown in the offensive, the cost of Russia's push toward Pokrovsk is only growing.
Over 1,000 Cuban nationals have fought for Russia in Ukraine, according to Ukrainian intelligence. Many were reportedly misled into joining the war effort.
Ukraine's military intelligence says at least 1,000 Cubans have fought or are currently fighting for Russia in Ukraine, with 96 killed or missing so far. The figure aligns with the lower end of a US estimate that up to 5,000 Cubans may be involved in the war. Most recruits receive just 2 weeks of basic training at the center near Moscow before being sent to the front. Ukrainian officials say many were lured by online ads promising construction jobs, only to be handed military contracts in Russian with no translation. Cuba's government denies any official involvement, saying its citizens are acting independently. But reports suggest Russian intermediaries, sometimes covering travel costs, are helping facilitate the process, with visas issued by Russian consulates. Cubans now rank 5th among foreign fighters in Russian ranks, behind North Koreans, Central Asians and Belarusians. Others from Syria, Nepal and African nations have also joined, though in smaller numbers.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.